About 38% of suspected perpetrators of human trafficking are women. And a lot of times what you'll see is that women are offending in collaboration or conjunction with male perpetrators as well. So you might see these women work on the front end to groom victims, to procure victims, to sort of bring victims to the male perpetrator. And sometimes they co-offend sexually against the victims. I think it's important to remind people that, particularly in a case like the Maxwell case, that this is not uncommon. Even statistically, when we look at the entire universe of perpetrators, the rate of female offending is still extremely low. And I think that has hindered the academic field from being able to study them, because mostly they're going to study incarcerated populations of offenders. And so few female offenders are incarcerated that it makes it hard to study them as a group. I think it's important when we talk about perpetrators, regardless of what gender they are, that we focus on the behaviors of perpetrators that need to be recognized and identified, and have those as the red flags. Are they paying special attention to a child? Are they singling a child out? Are they buying the child gifts? Are they giving the child money? Are they isolating the child to a separate location? Right? Those are all behaviors that any perpetrator is going to use in the grooming process in order to be able to not just groom the child, but groom the people that are around the child trying to protect the child. I think that one of the most important things is to create a dialogue around the fact that sometimes women do offend. But I think it's also really important to sort of use this as an opportunity to educate the public about how women will co-offend with intimate partners, and also be part of that facilitation of abuse. And that can happen in both a sex trafficking context, but it can also happen in just an everyday context. It's important to remember that when we're talking about child sexual abuse, the majority of those, if there is a female offender, the majority of those offenders are going to be related or within the child's circle of trust. I think that culturally, we still have a lot of denial to break through. People don't want to believe that other people that they know and trust could commit those types of crimes, because the majority of the time, someone's going to know them. It's going to be someone on their basketball team, or it's going to be a trusted teacher, or it's going to be a relative or a grandfather, right? And nobody wants to believe that about somebody that they're close to or that they know. We're still dealing with a lot of denial on the part of the court systems, judges, law enforcement. We see denial everywhere within the system itself. And that's what we try to get at, is to get at trying to reform the system so that when survivors do come forward, they're going to be met with a more trauma-informed response and a more victim-centered response. And that victims aren't going to walk away from that experience feeling additional trauma just from having to interact with people within the system. In terms of prevention, One of the most important things is to make sure that as children are being taught as they're growing up, that empathy is emphasized and the ability to be able to empathize, because you really can't commit an act of sexual violence if you have a strong capacity for empathy. That empathy is sort of a buffer to prevent that. And I think we have an empathy deficit in this country. And so I'd really like to see more emphasis put on empathy education early on as a source of primary prevention for sexual violence. In terms of secondary prevention, when you have a child that's been abused and is exhibiting behaviors where they're acting out sexually, which is very common, it's really important to get that intervention. And that's youth have brains that you can actually sort of work with and, through cognitive behavioral therapy techniques that can then pull them back from this sort of lifelong potential to offend. And then when we're talking about the adult population, around 40% of offenders, based on some of the data we have from like DNA cases, they're serial offenders, and they have between 2 and 15 victims each. And so another form of primary prevention, and I know this is not popular right now, is to make sure that those people that are serial offenders are identified and they are incarcerated and kept away from people so that they can't re-victimize more people. And so you have a very high number of offenders that are doing the majority of the offending. And if you can contain that, you're going to see a lot of the sexual violence become diminished.